Hello and welcome to my new video. This time I created a timeline for the Conjuring Universe. In this video I will go through each entry of the franchise and talk about when they take place and then put them in the timeline. The order will be for the main plot of each entry, but I will also talk about other significant parts of each entry if they take place at another time. I will start with the 9 main movies of the franchise, then talk about 2 movies that are considered non-canon by some people but are linked to the universe. Then there will be some short films, 2 plays, and at last the comics. Please be aware that there will be spoilers for everything that is part of the Conjuring universe. So, without further ado, let's start the video. First we look at the movie that started the franchise, The Conjuring. In the beginning of the movie we get an insert with the year 1968. This is when the Warrens first came in contact with the Annabelle doll. We will see this scene in every Annabelle movie, but the year will be retconned later. But for now I will place the beginning in 1968. For the main plot I didn't find anything specific that could give me a hint when it takes place. But every case the Warrens investigate in the movies takes place in the same year as its real life counterparts, and the Perron family haunting case was in the year 1971. So the main plot for the movie will also be placed in this year. The Conjuring will be the first entry to the timeline. Next in line will be the movie Annabelle. The beginning of the movie shows the same scene as The Conjuring does, so we know that it takes place in 1968. After that we get an insert which says 1 year earlier. That means the main plot of the movie takes place in 1967. But now we get the retcon I mentioned before. On television in the movie we see a documentation of the Manson family murders that happened in 1969. And later, after the murdering of the neighbors, we see a shot of a newspaper that reports this murdering with a date in 1970. This would mean the main plot of the movie takes place in 1970 and the beginning shot takes place in 1971. Also, the beginning of The Conjuring and the Warrens' first contact with Annabelle is now changed to 1971. So the whole first Conjuring movie takes place in this year. This change of the year will make more sense with some later installments of the franchise, so this is the proper placement for this. Now we only have one thing to speak about in the Annabelle movie, and it is its ending. After the family got rid of Annabelle, we got an insert that says 6 months later. We now see how Annabelle gets in the hands of the mother that gifted the doll to the people shown in the beginning of the movie. So the end also takes place in 1971. The placement of Annabelle in the timeline will be before The Conjuring. The next movie to talk about is The Conjuring II. For the beginning of the movie we again get no proper placement when it takes place. But what is shown here is the movie's version of the Amityville horror case. The Warrens investigated this case in the real world in 1976. The only thing that doesn't quite fit is the statement of Lorraine that the ghost that haunts this house is the one who committed the murders 1 year ago. But the real life murders happened in 1974, not 1975. But I think this is either a little mistake or just a statement for this to happen around 1 year ago because the murders happened at the end of 1974. So I will simply put the beginning in 1976. For the main plot, the placement will be easier because we get an insert with the year 1977. So, The Conjuring 2 will be placed after The Conjuring. Up next is Annabelle Creation. To place this movie more simple, I will have to talk about it starting at the end. So at the end of this movie we get to see again the neighbor murdering shown in the first Annabelle movie, and we already know this takes place in 1970. And this murdering takes place 12 years later to the end of the main plot of the movie as shown in an insert. This will put the main plot in 1958. We also have another 12 years later insert after the beginning of the movie. That will put the beginning of the movie in 1946. This is also the first movie in the franchise to have post-credit scenes. The mid-credit scene shows Annabelle again in her holy prison, so this will be shortly after the main plot of the movie in 1958. The post-credit scene is a preview for the Nun and shows an insert with the year 1952. On the timeline, Annabelle Creation is now the first installment. The next movie is The Nun. At the beginning of the movie we see a short recap of the Nun in The Conjuring 2, so this takes place in 1977. As seen as in the Annabelle Creation preview, the Nun's main plot takes place in 1952, confirmed with another insert. At the end we get an insert that states 20 years later, and then we see the Warrens showing the exorcism of Frenchie to some students. This scene we first saw in the first Conjuring movie, and it takes place in 1971. So the 20 years later is not quite right, it only takes place 19 years later, but I think we can let this slip. So the Nun will be placed even before Annabelle Creation on the timeline. The last movie in the Annabelle trilogy and the next movie to talk about will be Annabelle Comes Home. Again, in the beginning we see the Warrens' first contact with Annabelle, that we already know is in 1971. And now we have the explanation why the retcon of the year the Warrens first met Annabelle makes more sense. We now get an insert with 1 year later. That would mean, if it weren't retconned, the main plot of this movie would take place before the main plot of The Conjuring, which just wouldn't make sense. Some would argue that this 1 year later insert could be the wrong one, but I think in the first Conjuring they simply just didn't know where this franchise was going. So I think the later movies are the ones that got this right. So because of this, the main plot for Annabelle Comes Home takes place in 1972. It will be placed after The Conjuring in the timeline. The next movie will be The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. This movie takes place in 1981, as stated in the insert in the beginning of the movie. At the end we will also see that the trial of Arne Johnson still takes place in 1981. But then we jump to Ed and Lorraine and their newly built pavilion, and I think this has to take place several months later. Ed has no cane anymore and the pavilion also needs time to be built. So this last scene has to take place in 1982. On the timeline, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It will be put at the last place for now. Coming up next will be the Nun II. Here we get another clear placement for the main plot with the insert at the beginning that states the year 1956. Only the mid-credit scene of the movie is a hard one to place. It shows a girl that answers the phone and then calling Mr. Warren because Pater Gordon is on the phone. The girl is not their daughter Judy. We never saw her call her father Mr. Warren. I think this is either a babysitter for Judy or a friend of her. I like to think that this is how Pater Gordon first made contact with the Warrens in The Conjuring 2, but this could also be a preview for a future Nun movie. But for now I'm happy to place this credit scene in 1977. The Nun 2 will be put after the first The Nun movie, but before Annabelle Creation in the timeline. The last movie of the main franchise will be The Conjuring Last Rites. In the beginning of the movie we see the birth of Judy, the Warrens' daughter. An insert shows that it is the year 1964. Then there is a montage of Judy growing up. We see her learning to walk, which children learn between the age 9 to 18 months. So this could take place a year later in 1965. Then we see more shots with an older Judy, and in the credits the actress who plays this version of Judy is credited with the role Judy 10 years old, so this takes place in 1974. For the main plot we get another insert with the year 1986. At the end of the movie we see Judy getting married, and because the main plot of the movie ends in late 1986, I think the marriage will take place a year later in 1987. The Conjuring Last Rites will be put at the end of the timeline. Now I want to talk about the two movies that can be considered to be connected to the Conjuring universe. The first one will be Wolf is at the Door. There is one character in this movie that connects it to the Conjuring universe. After the first murder we see a detective investigating. This is Detective Clarkin. He also shows up in the first Annabelle movie. This movie depicts the Manson family murders in 1969. This year we also get confirmed in an insert. The end of the movie shows a montage that kinda feels like a documentary, the same or a similar one shown on the TV in the first Annabelle movie. So I will put the end of the movie in 1970. Wolf is at the Door will be put right before Annabelle on the timeline. The next movie is even more linked to the Conjuring universe, and you maybe already guessed it, it is the Curse of La Llorona. The connection here is Father Perez. He also shows up in the first Annabelle movie and even talks about his encounter with Annabelle. The movie begins with an insert with the year 1673 and shows us the origin of La Llorona. The main plot of the movie takes place in 1973 as shown in another insert. This means the Curse of La Llorona will be put after Annabelle comes home in the timeline. Now we jump to some short films. In 2013, before the first Conjuring movie was released, they released the 3:07 AM project. It was sort of a promotion for the upcoming movie and it contained 4 short films. The first short film was titled This One for the Lady. In this short film we don't get any clue when it takes place, but it seems to be around the time when it was released, so I go with somewhere in the 2010s. The second short film, called The Séance, is a found footage style short film and clearly states that the year is 2013. The third one, simply titled Box, looks to be intentionally filmed as it was older. After searching when cameras captured videos that looked like that in the short film, I came to the conclusion this has to take place in the 1940s. The fourth and last video is titled One Last Dive and again gives no clue when it takes place, but it also looks to take place around the release year. So again I would say 2010s. So, This One for the Lady, One Last Dive and The Séance will be put after the Conjuring the Last Rites in the timeline, and Box will be put before the first Nun movie. The next short films are the 5 winners of the My Annabelle Creation contest. In 2017 there was a contest to promote the movie Annabelle Creation, and each entry had to depict a 2-minute long horror short film that feels like it exists in the Conjuring universe. So with this in mind, these short films should also be placed on this timeline. The first one is The Nurse. The hospital this story takes place in has quite modern hospital beds, but it feels more like it takes place somewhere in the 2000s than around the release of this short film. The second short film is The Confession, and for this one I found a comment under the video where somebody else asked when this takes place, and the answer was mid-1970s. The third one, titled What's Wrong with Mom, shows a possessed mother and the Warrens standing in front of their door and ringing their bell. The fact the Warrens show up feels like this takes place somewhere in their prime. Because the gap between when the first and second Conjuring movie are taking place is so big, I will put this short in between them in a 1970s time frame. The fourth short film is titled Blund's Lullaby. I first would have placed it in the 70s, maybe 80s, based on the items in the house. But for my luck, one of the creators of this short film, Amanda Nielsen, responded to me asking her what they had in mind when this short takes place. Her answer was that this takes place somewhere in the 1990s. The fifth and last short film is Innocent Souls, and its fit in the timeline was as hard to guess as to even finding this short film. There's only one thing that gives me the slightest clue when it takes place, and it is the fact that the kids shown are using flashlights rather than smartphones. So this I think takes place in the 2000s. To put them all in the timeline, The Confession and What's Wrong with Mom will be put between the Curse of La Llorona and the Conjuring 2, and Blund's Lullaby, Innocent Souls and The Nurse will be put between the Conjuring Last Rites and the 3:07 AM project short films. Now it is time to talk about the Conjuring The Lover comics. This is a 5-part story that serves as a prequel to The Conjuring The Devil Made Me Do It, and we even get the 1981 year confirmed on the first page of the first comic. So the placement is clear, The Conjuring The Lover will be put right before The Conjuring The Devil Made Me Do It. This was not everything to the comics. Every The Conjuring The Lover comic had a backup story. These are shorter stories put at the end of each comic and they are titled Tales of the Artifact Room. The story included in the first comic is titled The Ferryman. We saw the ferryman already in Annabelle Comes Home with his coins, but I don't think the Warrens got every coin that has ever been linked to the ferryman. This fact is important to where I put this story. This story is narrated and shows a haunted man and how the haunted came to be. I will place this comic only at the part where the narration takes place. The only clue that is really shown in the comic is the car. This seems to be a 1990s model and this will be where I put this story. The next Tales of the Artifact Room story was included in the second comic and is titled The Bloody Bride. At first this seems to be a reference to the bride shown in Annabelle Comes Home, but some major clues shows us that this is a different bride. We see the lady who bought the wedding dress Google its original owner, and we see that the original owner murdered 5 people in 2010. Also, the Google search bar has a design it first had in 2018, so I think this story takes place either in this year or shortly after. The story included in the third comic is called The Accordion Monkey. On the first page of the story we see the Warren's artifact room, but again this story is narrated from beginning to the end. Again I will only place this story based on the point from where it is narrated. On the first page we get a clue that the narrator fled Germany in 1933. We then see him as a doctor in America, and the story takes place over many years before the point from where it is narrated. So I think this narrating point has to take place in the late 1930s, so I will put it there. The fourth story included in the fourth comic, titled Sleeping Song, shows us a backstory of the little music box with the mirror in it that we saw in the first Conjuring movie. The boy who possesses this music box was killed a few years before the Conjuring takes place, so we get told in the movie. So this story has to take place somewhere between that, so I will place it in the 1960s. And the last of the backup stories included in the fifth comic, called The Chalice, finally gives us again a proper placement, and it is the year 1951. So now the placing of these last comic stories. The Accordion Monkey will be the first story of this timeline. The Chalice will be put between the 3:07 AM Project short film box and the first Nun movie. The Sleeping Song will be put between Annabelle Creation and Wolf is at the Door. The Ferryman will be placed between Blund's Lullaby and Innocent Souls. And at the very end of this timeline the Bloody Bride will be placed. So, this was my complete The Conjuring Universe timeline. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe use it in the future for a watch and read through. A link to Reddit will be put in the description to the timeline in written form. Special thanks goes to Taranium on the comic board. Your timeline helped me a lot for a counter check. And maybe you can update it with some of my findings. A link to this timeline will also be put in the description. Another special thanks to Amanda Nielsen, one of the creators of Blund's Lullaby. You were the only one that responded to one of my inquiries. In the description you will also find the links for all short films mentioned on YouTube. To not miss more timeline videos like this, subscribe and click the bell. And also please consider liking this video, it would help me a lot. Thanks and see you in the next one.